kilometers down this road. They are said to be equipped with a vast array of high-tech weaponry, and those with military knowledge are wondering when and not if they're going to use it. Gaddafi forces have been spotted in the area, and although opposition fighters seem unfazed, locals are aware of what lies ahead.
What about if they go to Sirte? And Sirte people, 100% they are waiting for these people. Really, I didn't know, maybe people without, they cut the half of them.
The nearby town of Ras Lanuf has changed hands several times. It's now held by the rebels. According to locals, Gaddafi's men simply withdrew. Now most here are leaving, fearful of what is going to happen.
We are stuck in the middle between both sides and don't know where the bombs are coming from.
What started as a civil uprising is developing into an armed struggle, but not yet a civil war that many fear. The sound of jets above sends the rebels into defense mode, firing wildly into the air at a target they cannot see.
There's a military plane. We're afraid of him. Let him, we come here to die.
But only 2 bombs that we know of were dropped, and both missed the large concentrations of fighters and hit the desert, and no one was hurt. Some are wondering whether the pilots are deliberately missing in sympathy with the rebellion. It's one of the many puzzling aspects to this conflict. Fighters, though, say Bin Jawad is only a temporary hold-up. They are preparing to take the fight onwards through Sirte, then Misrata, and then finally Tripoli. No one here, however, predicts what tomorrow may bring. Tony Bertley, AlJazeera, near Bin Jawad, north-central Libya.
Well, as we saw in that report, one of the clear advantages that Gaddafi's forces have over the rebels is warplanes. And in an effort to counter that threat, the rebels are now increasingly calling for the international community to impose a no-fly zone over Libya. The US president is saying that he is still considering all the options. Patty Colhane has more from Washington.
As the constant gun battles rage, the back and forth for control of a country, and Libyans die in numbers not yet known, the U.S. president sends a message.
We stand for democracy, we stand for an observance of human rights, and that we send a very clear message to the Libyan people that we will stand with them.
But the bigger question for these fighters is how will the U.S. stand with them, and when?
I wouldn't characterize the likelihood of further options being pursued as greater now, but we have said from the beginning that those options were on the table, and none of them have been removed from the table.
There's been a lot of talk about this so-called table, so let's take a look at what is supposedly on it. One option, instituting a no-fly zone. That's what the U.S. Senate is pushing for, but the U.S. military has pushed back, saying it would be complicated and would require military strikes. Another option being talked about by some politicians, giving weapons to the rebels.
It would be premature to send a bunch of weapons to a post office box in eastern Libya. We need to not get ahead of ourselves in terms of the options we're pursuing.
The administration says it wants to know more about the rebels first, and adds sending weapons is not currently allowed under the existing UN sanctions. The other option, humanitarian assistance. This seems to be where the Obama administration is putting much of its focus, agreeing to give another $15 million to aid groups Monday. Some experts predict that will be the extent of what the U.S. will be willing to do.
It'll lean much more toward humanitarian assistance, like helping the refugees, for example, providing food, rather than actually using military force to attack Gaddafi.
The U.S. president can hear the cries for help from the battlefields, feel the push from the politicians, even in his own party, but in the end, only he can answer the question, what is the U.S. willing to do? Patty Colhane, AlJazeera, Washington.
Well, meanwhile, AlJazeera has confirmed that the French and British missions to the UN are working on a draft resolution to create a no-fly zone over Libya. And on Monday, the group of 6 Gulf Arab states, known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, issued their own statement calling on the Security Council to, quote, protect Libyan civilians, including through a no-fly zone. NATO's chief, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, has said any NATO operation to impose such a zone would need a UN resolution. Well, Hani Faris is president of the Trans-Arab Research Institute, an American think tank in Boston, and a professor of political science at the University of British Columbia. He joins me now live from Vancouver. Thank you for being with us. Is this no-fly zone proposal going to fly?
Even if it flies, and even if the West is able to buy out the Russians and the Chinese and have them endorse the proposal, it's going to be a very difficult process. However, if it does succeed and the resolution is passed by the Security Council, consider what scenario will occur. It will have to ask NATO to implement the proposal. And within NATO, the only power that has the capability to enforce a no-fly zone is the United States, with token support from countries such as the United Kingdom and France. In this case, if the US becomes involved, and as the Secretary of Defense has said, it's actually waging war on Libya. Now, many say the no-fly zone is not an act of war or is not a military intervention. They are fooling themselves. It's better to call a spade a spade.
And isn't it?
A woman cannot be half pregnant. She's either pregnant or no pregnant.
But isn't there a case to be made?
Is a military act.
Isn't there a case to be made to engage in Libya for the international community?
Well, when you talk of the international community, you're basically referring again to Western powers. And the Western powers do not have a good record in the Middle East. We know what happened in Iraq just recently, and we know the record left by the no-fly zone. However, superpowers and great and major powers do not act out of altruistic reasons. Altruism is used to hide real intentions. And my fear is that given the strategic influence of Libya, that the West, if they become militarily involved, they will come and exact a heavy price on Libya after the war ends.
Your fears of Western involvement are very taken on board and probably well-founded. But the question then has to arise, why isn't the Arab community in a position or have the desire, it seems, to actually do something about this?
Unfortunately, and for a long time, the Arab world has lost its compass. As you said, it's imperative that the Arabs gather and arrange either a multinational Arab force or some form of pressure on Gaddafi to relent and either drop out or allow the resistance and encourage them to achieve their objectives. However, this is not happening. And unfortunately, within such circumstances, we should not, as an Arab world, allow Westerners to come into our countries and use force to effect their objectives, irrespective of our sympathy with the revolution in Libya.